Our next speaker is Terry Swack. I think you're all familiar with her. I did do a little bit of LinkedIn searching, and there was a couple of great quotes up there. Joel Mackauer said, "Terry is a terrific visionary designer of both systems and companies." And Daniel Goldman, a clean tech exec and investor, said, "Terry is a thought leader in the area of sustainability. She has developed and implemented groundbreaking business." So Terry is going to help us close the DaS Symposium out for 2013. Please give her a big hand.
Well, thanks everyone for hanging out till the bitter end. And this presentation, I'm really proud to share with you. It will not only be upbeat, but I want to kind of bring attention to how much change has transpired since we started talking about sustainability in this community. And I also want to thank this community for being so supportive of me coming into it and learning from all of you, as I do every year and even all year round, because so many of you are my friends and have been so generous in supporting my journey. So again, just because I'm in the business of benchmarking and comparing, we're going to benchmark with this statement that I started my keynote address in 2009 on the topic of sustainability, innovation, and the future of the engineering software industry. This was my first slide. And I challenged all of the folks in the room to say, who's thinking about this right now? Who would say it out loud if they were allowed to? Half the hands went up. So that's where we were in 2009. People in the room, my customers, aren't asking for this. So what we've seen happen in the past 5 years around the market conditions for greener product development is that here we are, measuring and reporting has become a requirement of doing business with a whole range of business drivers that we'll talk about in just a minute. But making greener products is no longer an option. It is a must-do going forward. And what we've seen is that, originally when we brought our product to market, there were a couple people in a company saying, geez, this green thing, we sort of figure this out. Fast forward 5 years, there isn't a Fortune 1000 company anywhere that doesn't have some size of corporate initiative, whether it's at corporate or it's in business units or it's global. They're trying like hell to figure it out. That's huge, 5 years. I think that's a lot of progress. Now, not to say that there isn't an infinite amount more to do, but as the name of our company suggests, Sustainable Minds, the only way that things are going to change is if you get people to think the same way. Right? You got to think the same way, and then we'll get them to act the same way. So the topic of my talk, aligning entrepreneurial efforts, I kind of grayed out entrepreneurial a little bit because really it's about aligning efforts, and I think everybody who is involved in sustainability in any environment is really acting entrepreneurially because they're making change. So I'm super proud to stand here today and tell you that Sustainable Minds is being used in over 600 locations in industry and education in 60 countries around the world, which shocks the hell out of me. We get about 200 or 300 people signing up for trial accounts every month. This is my favorite new customer. This is the University of Mauritius. Professor signed up for an account last month. We do no marketing. We don't advertise. We don't market. People just find us, come to the website, and I attribute it to both the demand and growth in the industry, which we'll talk about, but I also attribute it to cloud technology, that we can be out there, it's not expensive, we can bring a product to market for not a lot of money, make something that's easy to use, understandable, and enables people to get meaningful results, which is what they need to get right now. It needs to be easy, simple, cost-effective, get something useful, make a decision. The thing I want to talk about first is, and I'm really happy to have heard the discussion about education, and I never could have anticipated this, is the adoption that we've seen in education. And we're not educational software. We've never done educational software marketing. We've just seen increasing interest, and not just in mechanical engineering, every kind of engineering, civil engineering, chemical engineering, environmental engineering, business and design. So what this reflects is everybody in industry, everybody in a manufacturing company has to make decisions about how to make products. So everybody in education who's ultimately going to go out into industry also has to learn about environmental sustainability so that they can be successful going out into business. So last year we decided to kind of be opportunistic about this opportunity and start to capture some of the knowledge that was being created by our customers and kind of just share it with the rest of the world. And so our whole positioning around education now is this story, that integrating environmental sustainability into education is all about jobs and the economy. And when I talk to potential customers, I kind of feel like a politician when I say that, so I apologize. But it is. It's all about jobs and the economy, and that people who are educators have something to sell, which is their school. And so schools are rapidly trying to develop their environmental sustainability curriculum across the university, and I think ASU is a great example of that. Because the schools know that they're going to attract more and better students, because young people, as everybody's talked about already, care and are interested in environmental sustainability. So those schools will get more customers, and ultimately the manufacturers who want to compete in the market are going to go recruit those students out of those schools, and ultimately everybody's going to get a better job, better company. It's a win-win all around. We started a webcast series called Creating Knowledge Workers for the Greener Product Marketplace, and we've had 4 of them now. We're going to have our 5th installment next month, where we've brought educators from every discipline, business, design, and engineering, to come on and tell a story. And we've created a standard template because we want the stories to be comparable. So the story starts out with the individual educator talking about who he is, who he or she is, what's their background, what have they done, what are they teaching now, what university are they teaching in, what school, what department, and then they talk about what course am I teaching, and now here's the project that I'm giving, and then they walk through some examples of the students' projects using Sustainable Minds, and then they wrap up talking about key learnings from the students, key learnings that they have culled from this as educators, so key learnings for educators. Then they talk about trends in education based on environmental sustainability, and then trends in the marketplace based on integrating this into education. So every single educator uses the same template, tells the same story, and we've had 15 folks come on, and these webcasts are on our website. You can go listen to them, and they're really inspiring because the educator is growing and learning, and the students are excited, and the results, the kinds of projects that they're being used on are massively disparate. From this woman at MCAD is using Sustainable Minds to teach information design because the students can actually rapidly build models and compare scenarios, and then as visual designers they have real data to then be able to create compelling information display so that people can understand this versus this, or to tell a bigger story. And that professor at Binghamton University teaches civil engineering, but focuses on medical device, and that's his TA. And I had them both come on together to talk about how the professor and the TA are team teaching, because most people teach like that. We actually have curriculum from 15 universities where the educators have given it to us, so that we can share it with other schools, because that's the thing that people need, is like, how do I get started teaching this? Just tell me what to do. So we're really trying to support the educators. This is actually, I think, probably the most interesting thing that's happening, is that we are getting customers equally in MBA programs as we are in engineering programs. And this is just some of the MBA programs who have become customers, and I'm, thrilled to tell you that Sloan is a customer. And, going back to these rules of sales that Rick identified for us, these are our selling points into business programs. That life cycle thinking is an innovation driver. It's a new platform. It drives new business models. It drives collaborative thinking, entrepreneurship, and bottom line, gives students a competitive advantage in the marketplace. These are all messages that resonate with the people that we're selling to, both at the dean level, the provost level, the curriculum development person, the professor. These are the messages that resonate. So let's talk about what's happening in industry, because now we know great education is moving, and we're now starting to create a population of students who can move into the marketplace. So let's talk about the complexity of what's happening in the marketplace. And I like to call it the alphabet soup of LCA, EPD, and PCR. Now, how many of you have ever heard of any of these acronyms? Let's see. Let's try LCA first. Do we all know what LCA is, or do you want me to explain it? Okay. Who's heard about EPDs? PCRs? All right, great. So consider this a tutorial. All right. So life cycle assessment, and talk just about that a little bit more in a second, is the ISO-certified scientific way of measuring the relative greenness of products and systems. And ultimately, everybody has decided that, all right, we're all going to agree this scientific method works. We're going to employ it in a bunch of different ways. And so this demand for transparency that is growing in the marketplace is what's driving LCA-based standards, metrics, and certifications. And what we've seen over the last few years now is that many different types of organizations are trying to step up to create standards, metrics, and certifications. So you see organizations like the Sustainability Consortium and the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, who we heard from last year, who brought in, who are effectively competitors coming together as an industry to figure out how are we going to measure green in our industry. What's it going to mean? How are we going to measure it? How are we going to compare? How do we distribute that out to our supply chain? Then you see organizations like NSF and UL Environment, who are the traditional testing companies. Okay. Who are the testing and certifying companies? They're getting in the business of, all right, well, how do we test and certify for green? And actually, the way their business model works, it's like any other kind of standard that they've been in the business of creating. They convene companies who are competitors, or sometimes not, but in any kind of standards group, they figure out, all right, here's how we're going to measure green, and they create what's called a product category rule document that says, here's how we're going to measure green, this is how the LCA needs to be done. And so they get paid a bunch of money to facilitate that PCR working group. And then at the end, they have the certification. So now every company in that industry will go out and create their environmental product declaration, their EPD, in conformance with the PCR, and go back to the certifying, or we call them program operators in the LCA business, and pay them again a lot of money to certify their product to the PCR. And then lastly, we're seeing lots of different kinds of government agencies trying to figure out how do we provide tools, metrics, data, how do we support the creation of greener thinking and action, and certainly how are we going to start deploying regulation. And the last one is referring to the California Green Chemistry regulation that's coming out, that is an LCA-based green chemistry review, where it's requiring any company that makes products that they'll sell into the state of California will ultimately have to prove that they're doing alternative assessments on toxic chemicals and other chemicals of concern. So what's an alternative assessment? It's concept exploration, right? It's exploring alternatives, comparing what's going to be the best solution and putting one forth, but being required to demonstrate that they're doing that they're actually thinking and working that way. So all of these kinds of organizations are rapidly working on creating these different ways to measure. They will ultimately all need distribution systems for the metrics, guidelines, templates to get it out there so that manufacturers can make better products to get those eco-labels or report or comply or get certified. So LCA, we've said, is the industry standard, globally accepted methodology for measuring green. And there's an extensive ISO series codifying how it needs to get done, how it needs to get reported. And the challenges or the problems that exist today as a result of how this scientific process and method has evolved is that there aren't a lot of people that know how to do it because it's kind of a rarefied field, and all of a sudden it got hot when the LCA folks went to Walmart 5 years ago and said, you really should start doing LCA on all your products, and that's what inspired Walmart's product scorecards, and it's just kind of taken off from there. So, it's very expensive and time-consuming. It's a massive data collection problem. It's very explicit because it's about measuring everything, and it's typically been done after a product's been manufactured because that puts the stake in the ground. This is what actually happened. Like I said, there's a shortage of knowledge, people who know how to do it. And there's also a shortage of understood use cases. What are you going to do with the results? There's a shortage of life cycle inventory data, so the building blocks that are used in the model to represent materials, processes, use phase consumables, transportation, end-of-life methods. The LCI data in the public data sets is often out of date. And further, as new materials and new options and disruptive technology moves the market forward, there's no fast distribution for data around these innovations in materials. So here's a quote from Heather Gatineau, who led the development of the EPD PCR business at UL Environment. This is actually a quote from a conversation I had with her, where she was talking about the limitation of the EPD PCR kind of standardized measurement and reporting process really taking off is the transparency of the tools. That life cycle assessment is a snapshot in time of a product's environmental performance, but people who ultimately have to make decisions on LCA-based reports need the information to be accurate, up to date, so they actually can make meaningful decisions. So you already know that Paul is kind of a quotable guy, and in talking with Paul about what's going on in the building products industry, he shared this slide with me. You've already seen it, and he said the collision is going to be epic of all of these eco-labels, efforts to measure, get certifications. How do you, as a building product manufacturer, provide evidence that you're doing the right thing, and then as a architect or a building owner are doing the right thing by purchasing the right products. How are we going to manage this morass of data requirements? And so just here's the little bit of tutorial. I'm going to take this apart. This is from NSF, another program operator. So the product category rule defines which data in a life cycle analysis or in an LCA is going to be used, collected, and reported. So it's very prescriptive. This is how seating is going to get measured. This is how refrigerators are going to get measured. This is how the LCA needs to be done. Here's the data. Then the LCA analyzes the data specified in the PCR. And from that, for each product in each company, they'll create the Environmental Product Declaration, which is the summary document of the data collected from the LCA as specified in the PCR. And it's the EPDs that will enable the comparison of products in a category for purchasers to make end state decisions. So when I've wrapped this up, I would like to hear from Ken about his perspective about how frequently a decision is made based on the information in an EPD.
When you wrap up.
Yes. So the problem with product category rules is that not many exist today. You can imagine it's about, seating manufacturers all coming together and saying, this is how we're going to measure seating. And there actually is a seating PCR. There's one that exists. But now think about every product category that goes into a building or any other industry, right? So that's going to get to be slow. Then where do all these PCRs live? How do you know where to go get them? So the American Center of Life Cycle Assessment is trying to create a PCR database, but they don't know how to get that funded, so we don't know if that will happen. And as I mentioned, who will be the arbiters of PCR development? Who do you really got to go to get the best, most efficient, standardized way of doing PCR creation? And there's a little bit of a conflict of interest there because that's how they make their money. So now if we look at what's in an EPD, there's 4 main categories of information. You've got your LCA results, but you're also required to get those LCA results third-party reviewed before you can even put them into the EPD. So that's a side process that has to happen. So you've got your LCA results, you've got whatever else is relevant in terms of variations in the products that should also get included. Then any other environmental performance data that's not LCA-based, and then whatever else you think is important to telling your sustainability story as a manufacturer, as long as it's relevant and product-related. So those are the 4 ingredients into an EPD, and that goes back to the program operator to get certified. So now let's look at some examples of some EPDs and companies that are creating them. So here's Armstrong. Armstrong has been a very early adopter of the PCR EPD movement. You can see that they've spent considerable time and dollars. Now think about what goes into the creation of an EPD. Now look at how many EPDs they've created. I was going to click through this, but I won't. An EPD is a minimum 18-page document. This is page 1 of an Armstrong ceiling tile EPD. One of the things I really like about it is they created this nutrition label-like thing where here's the LCA impact results and here are the performance attributes of the product, which I think is really nice that they coupled environmental performance with functional performance on the front page of the EPD. The rest of the document is full of all of this technical information, just page after page after page, which I, again, am interested to know who pours through those pages. Bottom line is this LCA PCR EPD business is serious business, and a whole bunch of things that go into it. It's very costly and very time consuming, and if you think about every product a manufacturer makes, what could this possibly cost them to do, and how could it possibly return on that investment in any reasonable time frame? So I can tell you a quick little story about Toto. Toto is the largest plumbing manufacturer in the world, and Toto has an attitude, a whole brand they call Totology. They attribute their leadership in the industry to their commitment to environmental sustainability. And it was Bill Strang, the president and CEO of North American Operations, who introduced me to Paul. And he said to me last year, he said, you really should meet this Paul guy. He's kind of weird, but great guy. You should talk to him. And here's Bill's reason why they're committed to sustainability. He wants to win, right? So winning, by today's definitions, is selling more toilets, saving more water, saving more energy. And, is he interested in leading a PCR group? No. Why would he want to do that, right? And tell everybody else what he's doing and waste time. No, he just wants to do it. And does he need somebody to tell him, that certify that his products are good? No, not really. He doesn't really want to spend the money on that. So his approach is that he set a policy that no new products get made where they have not been able to substantiate in the product design phase that they actually are making measurable environmental performance improvements. They use Sustainable Minds in that process of design, so benchmarking and design and running scenarios. They've got super users who've been trained, who are part of each product category team. We've developed with them custom data from their primary manufacturing facilities. They're modeling with their own data. And we're doing full LCAs on products that are most important to have more robust benchmarks to then go in and design against. So these are Bill's slides. He goes out in the marketplace and talks about how important LCA is to him, but what he's doing with it. And he's also an Eco Scorecard customer. And so what he talks about is how important it is to then be able to tell that story through all the channels he has available to him. So his BIM models and Smart BIM are tagged with Eco Scorecard data, so now users of Revit and SketchUp, when they're building a model, can have access to Eco Scorecard data. But what's interesting is that, so here's a again, these are Bill's slides, so he likes putting lots of stuff on his slides. Here's the list of environmental characteristics from LEED, and you can see up till now there's this line that says life cycle analysis completed, and it's binary, it's yes or no. But starting in September, LEED 4 is changing from kind of green-sounding material-based attributes to requiring LCA-based reporting on materials. So my question is, knowing what I just told you about how complex it is to do an LCA and report through an EPD, how is it possible that an entire industry is going to go from LCA yes or no in 1 year to LCA full results? That I don't know. So my last slide. So I'm going to leave you with this, again, this opportunity presentation. This is what's going on in the industry, that people want to measure, they need to measure to make better products, and they need to measure to be able to report on better products. So how do we, as the engineering software industry, align what we create to enable product manufacturers to do that more efficiently, seamlessly, design better products, report better products, and continue to iterate and improve and have that data be accessible and meaningful and useful to the people who are making decisions at the end of the day.
I think Terry has laid down one hell of a challenge for tool makers. And to answer her question, I can in all confidence report that absolutely zero of our projects are able to take this into account. Zero. We're trying to be very aware of materials and toxic impacts of materials. That's a huge educational challenge for us just internally. Getting access to information about those materials is a huge challenge, and quite frankly, we're so locked into a system of construction in an industrialized system that in many cases we don't even have alternatives available. So enough of that. Please, let's give Terry a big hand. Complicated topic.